Good morning. So good to be with you all again. Well, we had our welcome yesterday, and today we'll start to get into the teachings, the practical application of the teachings, and the devotion that's actually required to live this in a constant state of mind, which is really the goal for all of us. We all want to be happy, and we want it consistently. We don't want patchwork of happiness. A little of this, a little of that. You know we are worthy of much more, so we have to ask for it. We have to really sincerely ask for it. And so we thought we would talk about our lives and the living of the principles is the way it's come in for us, and maybe some of the phases and stages that we seem to go through, if it's helpful for you to have a little bit of an idea of some of the things we've gone through over these years. And for me it's, 35 years with the Course, but there's been a lot of different stages and phases of kind of letting things wash away in my mind, because these beliefs and these thoughts become patterns, and they become quite fixated. And then to have them washed away takes quite a lot of willingness to really open your mind up to a place where you just can be shown. And as Jesus says, there's 10 characteristics of a teacher of God, and there's 6 stages that you go through in this awakening process. But the first characteristic is trust, and the last characteristic is open-mindedness, which is really another word for non-judgment, where all things are equally acceptable because you're so anchored in the purpose in your mind of forgiveness that you can welcome everything and everyone with open arms, in the sense that your mind isn't pushing anything away or addicted to things. So you reach a place of really feeling like the world has been neutralized by Jesus and the Holy Spirit, taking away all the charges, the positives, the negatives, the attractions, the repulsions. And so, after the Course came into my experience in the Parable of David in 1986, then it was kind of interesting. It was a year of immersion, using the Course more like an oracle, just praying and opening the book. And then I noticed that it was only 1 year later where Jesus sent me down to get that little travel trailer I mentioned yesterday to live in the woods. Very simply, no electricity, no running water. I had A Course in Miracles, and I had Walden, Henry David Thoreau's Walden with me. Those were my two, because he went to the woods as well. I thought I better check in with one who's already been out there in the woods and how it went. And he said, I'm going to go for the truth, and if it's dark, I'm going to publish it to the world, and if it's sublime, I'm going to publish it to the world. But he went there with an open mind to say, what will I find when I'm out there in the woods, living a simple life? And so that came in for me in 1987, and then there was about 4 years of more deepening, facing all kinds of things, on and off in the woods. And then it was about 3 years, 1990, travel began, in more lengthy travel. Went to the Catskill Mountains to spend a lot of time with Ken and Gloria Wapnick, and then in 1991, massive travel started, like going away for 5.5 or 6 weeks at a time, just to learn divine providence, to go without any kind of organizational support or no credit cards, just go out there and travel around the United States and Canada and trust that places to sleep would show up and food would show up and whatever else I seemed to need. So it took about 5 years of divine providence to really see, wow, Jesus really has got this. At first it was like, I hope you've got this. I hope you've got this. Because nothing in my history of 10 years of university or nothing in my upbringing tells me that I can go out in the United States and Canada without any money and survive. Because there was no experience of the miracle. But I have to say, once I finally said yes and I went out, then everything came very easily. And, sometimes I'd have 2 or 3 offers to go home with somebody to stay the night or stay several nights when I'd go to a course group. And so it wasn't so much that I was hoping that I would have enough resources to survive. It was more like I had to start to discern, to turn things down and really listen to where Jesus wanted me to go. Because it was such an abundance of being provided for that there were so many offers and so much came at me so fast, I had to learn how to be very discerning. In 1991, there was a woman, Beverly, that was traveling with me, and we went to so many Course in Miracles potlucks, and they fed us so much that her thighs just ballooned out. She gained so much weight because she couldn't say no. And the food flew at us. We weren't like scavenging, trying to find an apple tree somewhere, to have a bite to eat. It was so much offers of places to stay, so much food, so many parties, so many things that we had to really be prayerful about what to accept and what to say. Thank you so much for the offer. What a blessing. But we don't need that. We already have plenty of options here. So that was a phase, and then I'd say about 1999 came the first nonprofit organization, and Jesus told a friend of mine that he should tell me that I will be traveling and doing many things in this lifetime, and that there will have to be a nonprofit organization to handle the flow of resources to support this internet and travel ministry around the world. And so I said, fine, it's great, whatever you need. He said, well, you have to answer some questions for the government about what you do and what you offer. I think about that time, by 1999, we did have this little booklet called Purpose is the Only Choice, and there was some cassette tapes, and we had the very first Movie Watcher's Guide to Enlightenment. And so I had to answer questions with the government, like, what does one person's opinions about movies, the government wrote, have anything to do with spiritual awakening? And then the guy who was setting the nonprofit up would say, you better write back to them. You ask the Holy Spirit what to say there. I don't know how to answer those questions. I said, sure. So I did answer the questions. I even sent the government a complimentary copy of the Movie Watcher's Guide to Enlightenment. And Purpose is the Only Choice. Maybe it's, I don't know, archived somewhere in, what's that, Smithsonian Institute or some, I don't know what it was, but that was way, way back. But I just bring that up to say that the first nonprofit was formed in 1999, and that was called the Foundation for the Awakening Mind. And from that point on, in modern day terms, the modern era we live in, that was a symbol that was used, just like St. Francis and the Franciscans lived very simply, sharing everything. And just like the Essenes back before Jesus, they lived in the desert, and they shared everything. And the apostles, you can't imagine that in the apostles that were with Jesus, they're saying, "Get off of that, that's my cup. I have the blue cup. Yours is the orange one, mine is the blue." I can't imagine the apostles, maybe they did get into argument about cups, but that was part of sharing everything, so we could focus on prayer, on purification, on devotion to God, and not get into all the energy it takes of mine and yours, and taking care of mine and yours, and maintaining the distance between mine and yours. To really take this, we have one purpose, we share the same mind, and let everything be under the direction of the Holy Spirit. And when we pray, it's not just a word, it's a state of mind of show me how to live, show me how to share. This doesn't seem to be a realm where sharing comes easy. There's so much privacy and ownership, and we have legal professions with high-paid lawyers to protect and defend the separation, mine and yours, and fairness, and we have rules, we have laws, we have judges, we have lawyers, we have judicial systems, we have Supreme Courts, and most disagreements will have to go the route of some kind of a formal judgment to judge what has to be given as right and wrong. It's not taken to the heart. Like Jesus said, "Blessed are the pure of heart, for they shall see God." It's not taken to prayer first, it's taken out into the form to try to solve the issue in the form. And it's bedlam. It's a wacky, crazy world where arguments are commonplace between couples, in families, in churches, in governments, in neighborhoods. Neighbors arguing over where the fence is and where the boundary lines are. So it seems to be quite easy to get caught up and trapped in the distractions of the world, which are always about separation and division. And it seems to take a lot of faith and willingness to go inward and trust your prayer to bring you the resolution. To trust that you have the power within you to pray and to find harmony, to find peace. That you have the access directly within your own heart to do that. And that's kind of a subject of ridicule in the world. If people get into an argument, if one or the other says, "Let's just pray," they have to really have a faith in prayer and the power of prayer to even do that. One person says, let's pray to resolve this. And "I'll see you in court," the other one says. That's the response to, let's just pray. So if you look back 1999 with that first nonprofit, and now we've just continued on, 22 years. 22 years of living in the simple principle of let's be devoted to God and let's share everything. It fits with our principles of no private thoughts and no people-pleasing. If you can have the faith and trust to share possessions, bank accounts, houses, cars, everything like that, then you must have a pretty strong prayer life and a strong faith, because the ego would say that's impossible. That's absolutely impossible. To do it for 22 years, the ego's like, not a chance, not a chance. something's going to buckle, something's going to cave, it's going to crash and burn at some point. But for us, it's very important, because the ego will try to use form to reinforce itself. The ego wants to use the form to reinforce division. The ego is a death wish, the ego is a belief in separation, and the ego does use form to reinforce itself. Say, I'm real, and haha, you're in another fight. That proves I'm real. That proves these teachings of Jesus don't work. And then Jesus is saying, have faith, stay with me, and keep practicing and keep your devotion, and you'll see that you do have the power within your mind to find the harmony, that you've always had the power, but you had to access it. So that's been our journey, and I think that's kind of the larger context underneath why we pray every day. We pray to be shown. We pray that everything in time and space be stewarded to point to God, to point to Jesus. We pray that if any time a challenge or a difficulty or a conflict arises, we take it to prayer first to resolve it. I know there was a woman back in the 1800s, in the turn of the century, named Mary Baker Eddy. Some of you know she was the founder of Christian Science. And her philosophy was, she put great focus on prayer, and she always said, pray first. Christian Science in this world kind of got a bad name. They were the ones that keep their kids from taking medicine. And so when you look at the flip side, you could see where, whoa, you could get a real reputation for that. But actually, if you really go into Christian Science, you see that the whole philosophy is based on pray. Pray first. Go fully into prayer. Go fully into the power of prayer. That's all the teaching was. But the ego will try to pick apart the form and avoid the content. And that's a very strong tactic of the ego. It's always doubting the form, questioning the form, judging the form, because it doesn't know what content is. And love is content. And love is actually, in its pure state, is purely abstract. It's actually way beyond the world of form. It's actually pure light, like they talk about in the near-death experiences when people are drawn to the light, that blazing light, and they talk about unconditional love, and then the words fail as they get closer to that presence. And that's really what love is. It's abstraction. It's pure abstraction. But this is a world of specifics, so that's why we need guidance. We're not, when we're addicted to the forms, we're far away from the abstract love of Christ and love of God. But we can be very practical, and we can have open gatherings like this where you can raise any topics, any questions, nothing's taboo, nothing's off limits, ask anything, we're transparent, we're an open book, and we trust that this openness will be used for the good of everyone, for the good of the whole universe. We're not thinking that there's going to be some kind of form outcome that we're hoping for. We're not even praying for a new earth, or we're not praying for the kingdom of heaven to come to earth. We're just praying to learn how to forgive as Jesus taught forgiveness. Because he was in direct contact with the Spirit, so he knew that we needed to learn how to forgive. But it's a very different forgiveness than the world teaches. Forgive someone for what they did to you. This is, as you know from the Course, forgive your brother for what he did not do for you. Oh, that's sounding more like it's a hallucination, that we have to release the whole hallucination before we can know that state of mind.
Yeah, prayer is almost a practical application in seek first the kingdom of heaven, because in prayer we're not saying we're waiting for situation to change, we're waiting for this particular situation or outcome to be a certain way. We're saying we are reaching for a state of mind first and foremost. And that's what I understand prayer is not so much pray of things, even though it could be part of it, wherever we're ready for. But eventually prayer becomes this desire to go straight to the peace that is available right here and right now. And when we reach that, somehow the specific instructions of where to go, how to extend that peace is given. And that becomes very present in the mind. And I feel this journey truly is, for me, a learning of how to understand or to know the Spirit through the prayer of being with Him, through reaching Him directly. And I think at the beginning when I started with the course, I was so far from the understanding and so far from the Spirit. I did ask some very specific questions. When I reached a certain point, I asked, why is that I'm not happy? What is wrong with my life? And then the course came to my life. And I also asked whether I should be in a specific location to be there or to go. And then I heard a voice. But at the time, I didn't connect those as prayer or guidance. I just thought, okay, I got an instruction very loud and clear. And it was so compelling. There was nothing in me not to follow that. It was too compelling. But there was no real understanding of what Spirit is and how to have a direct access to the peace and to the love that is really available in all the moments. So really then this journey through the instruction that is fizzling through, at first it was quite surprising, almost like, oh, where is that coming from? To, I think when I met David and joined the community, it became a conscious way of living, to know that, okay, this becomes the most important thing because we realize that our goal of life has shifted fundamentally. Our goal becomes peace, becomes forgiveness, and we're reaching it in the moment. And so I feel that that's what this journey is really about. And when the purpose becomes really single-focused and very single, then really everything that happens throughout the day does not have a conflict in mind. You know, if there is a conflict or if there is something I don't really like, I have some other feelings, it's always come down to what is the purpose of this. And whenever it became clear the purpose is to learn forgiveness, the purpose is to get access to the peace right now, then suddenly everything becomes acceptable. Then I just feel I can step into this place to Jesus. I'm your humble student. Please show me how to even use this to pray and to get into that spot. So I think the beauty of it is what was unexpected was that Spirit has a plan for all of us. And the plan was already set. And it seems to involve a lot of people and mighty companions to do it together, at least for myself and for a lot of you I heard yesterday. That was a plan that we didn't realize before. But once we accept His plan to come here then it every day becomes okay. Then show us. We can come back to this purpose. Show us. So that is a very exciting ride together. Yeah.
Yeah, I think you start to feel that the journey is involuntary, miracles are involuntary, and that the prayer of your heart is what you want or desire, and when your wanting is applied through the ego, you have many wants and desires in this world. It's multiplied, and it's very unfulfilling. You can seem to satisfy the desires for things of this world in part, but there isn't a lasting fulfillment that comes from fulfilling the desires. When they're coming through the ego filter, the ego has made up a world of distractions to seek and not find. And Jesus told us in the Bible, seek and you shall find. Knock and the door shall be open. But he's saying that unified desire is creation. You return to your original state of light as a perfect light child of God in unified desire. When you want only God, you experience God, you experience creation. When you want only love, he says in the Course, you will see nothing else. So that wanting is very important. That's what the desire is. The 23rd Psalm from the Bible starts off the Psalms of David. 23rd Psalm is, first line is, the Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. Wow, that doesn't seem very applicable to the human race. It's almost like, what? That's like impossible. And actually it is applying to the spirit aspect of ourself that has been forgotten. He's like saying, if the Lord is your shepherd, then you shall remember your oneness with the Lord. Is basically, that's what I shall not want means. It's not, I shall be deprived. That's how the ego interprets the last part. The Lord is my shepherd, I shall be deprived. The ego is like, yeah, that's why I told you there is no Lord. It doesn't make sense. But actually it does have meaning when you really see it for what it is. Now that process, though, of unwinding from the ego, it takes a lot of prayer and devotion to actually move into that place where you don't want for anything, where you start to feel that you are everything, and that the whole purpose of this world was to know who you are, to know the everythingness of your spiritual self, your higher self. And so I know there was some that have talked about spiritual community, and even that is not something that was a goal. I know Francis grew up in Beijing, China, and there was no talk of God or spiritual communities or anything. It was, atheistic parents and family, and I know if I grew up in a Christian family in Cincinnati, Ohio, and while there was some talk every once in a while about God, we did not sit at the dinner table and talk about spiritual community. I didn't know what that was as a child. I didn't know what spiritual community was as a teenager. If somebody asked me, I'd say, what's that? I didn't know, if somebody asked me in my 20s, what is the spiritual community, I would say, what are you talking about? You tell me. Give me an example, what is it? So by just having a desire for peace and a desire for love and happiness and joy, then the form of what seems to be a spiritual community was like presented to us, I think, purely as a means of forgiveness. If our brothers and sisters are mirrors, and I'm asking for happiness, then I have a feeling that what seems to be spiritual community or relationships or partnerships are all just a reflection of the prayer for healing. It's a way of uncovering what's unconscious in the mind and bringing it to the surface in a pretty rapid way. And I have said, I think the fastest way to God is through silence and relationships, and the ultimate fastest is if you have both, silence and relationships. That stirs the ego out of its hiding place. It doesn't like those things because it wants to project and blame or resist. It doesn't want the mind to be still. Like the Bible said, be still and know that I'm God. The ego has made a whole cosmos to try to defend against that realization. So it's interesting, that topic of spiritual community is interesting too. Recently I've done some Spanish events where I would just say, type into the chat if you're interested in spiritual community, or leave a message or send an email or something. And just in the last several weeks, there's been about 50 people who said, yes, I am definitely interested in spiritual community. That was just the Spanish, putting it out to a group of Spanish people. But that really is a good inroads, actually, about spiritual community, because it wasn't something that we knew about or signed up for, or it was not a goal. I never had a goal. I did find out about many wonderful teachers, for example, Paramahansa Yogananda, and there are now Ananda communities all over the world, very loving, devoted Ananda communities that have been going on for decades, that Paramahansa got started. And so if you go back throughout history, even I did wake up maybe about a week ago with this word in my mind, cloistered. So I typed cloistered into Google, and boom, 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 Google gave me the history of cloistered communities. I actually think the Essenes and the Apostles were cloistered, the Franciscans, but the Benedictines around 500, and it was like boom, boom, they're sprinkled throughout history. Cloistered communities devoted to finding God. And I said, well, cloistered, what does it mean? Living apart from the world and the distractions of the world that block you from God. I like that definition. I'm willing to live apart from the world if it will free my mind from the distractions from finding God. I'll take that definition, because I think it's our mind is where the cloistering happens. We're asked to do mind training. We're asked to pray and come into the stillness. We're asked to learn to meditate on God and the light and higher being values. And so to me, that is kind of the heart of what it is. And also with us, sharing and wanting to extend our joy and our happiness and letting the Spirit bring the symbols in, then I think spiritual community has been a part of that. Not that it means anything in specific terms, but if you see it as just a backdrop or a device that the Holy Spirit can use to take you higher and higher in awareness, then I think that's where the real utility, the real value comes in.
Yeah, spiritual community is almost like this construct where when you choose a very, very clear purpose, then you see a group of people, like what the coach was saying to the friend on the flight, I'm here to pray with 14 friends. And I thought it was a really beautiful summary, because that is exactly what spiritual community is this strong devotion in the mind, draws the symbols and draws the people who reflects that kind of devotion. Then we come together and we can together put that as the priority to pray, as a way of hearing directions to unwind from this world and to find the peace. And I really see the reason that this works so well is because of the open-mindedness. Because when the mind is so open, it's almost like we're all ear spirit. There is no symbol that we will say you cannot use. That is off limit. And there is no preconceived plan that we put in front of you to say, please fit in this box for me, for him, and for the group. It's basically saying every day is a blank slate, because we don't really know how together, with 20 people, 40 people together, we're going to move forward toward this, the end, the destiny of forgiveness. Because it is not a journey in form, it's not a journey in planet Earth where we have a destiny to say, oh, in 50 years, this spiritual community flourish, and we have 200 people. Yeah, we achieved it. There is absolutely no goal, but we have a goal, which is we want present peace, and we want present peace without any condition. We want to know the Spirit so intimately that we want to know that it's living inside of us, that we can access right now. So every day let's access it right now together, whatever symbols the Spirit provides. So in that way, like David said, the spiritual community first, even to form, is not out of a preconceived idea to say we should have a spiritual community. It never come from that. It came from devotion to the Spirit. Then people seem to say to David, we want to live with you. And David was told, was shown. And that is actually a very striking example of how it's still the case today on a daily basis. We don't know how the spiritual community would look like tomorrow, but it's shown when we come together. This is how to use the property. This is how to use the program. Because underlying it is, let's going for the Spirit, and let's going for forgiveness. And then we give the symbol of everybody and everything this role to show us. That's what I started to realize at some point. I just, one day I woke up and I heard Jesus say in my mind, like, why are you always focusing on what's wrong and instead of focusing on what's right? And I thought, well, because what's wrong feels so real. That's what my mind automatically focuses on and needs to be solved. But Jesus said, you can focus on what's wrong, but you can never solve. But really, everything can be seen as loving thought. Everything can be seen as a loving thought. And it was a very, very different way of seeing. I realized there is a different way. Even the goal I was holding up to that point was not even on the mark, because it was a change of perception. I can see everything as wrong, and I can solve it based on what I think. Or I can really think everything is Spirit's answer to a prayer I already gave. Everything is His loving thoughts reflect back. And that, I have to say, truly sent me in peace, in experience. That truly sent me in peace. Then I just have to remind myself over and over again. But that is truly what the spiritual community is we are under His guidance. We're sustained by His guidance. And we're following His guidance in absolutely every single decision. And it's really fun to do it that way.
Yeah, it's kind of like, in order to really go into the true meaning or the essence of anything, you have to forget whatever you've learned. You have to forget it all. to know what it is. And a lot of times when people think of spiritual community, they think of maybe like Mother Teresa, and she, of course, was famous. She took on the vows of poverty, chastity, obedience, but also she started making up vows, her own vows, to find joy. She would add to the traditional ones too. And people think of her in terms of spiritual community. But what you were just talking about, there was a famous scientist that basically said that. That was Albert Einstein. He said there's two ways to live your life with regard to this world, that everything is a miracle or that nothing is a miracle. This is coming from a preeminent scientist who not necessarily associated with spiritual community. He had his scientific community, for sure. And that was an interesting part. But to come up with something like that, to live as if everything's a miracle or nothing's a miracle, that's describing the right mind and the wrong mind that Jesus talks about in the Course. So you can see it has to do more with an attitude, a state of mind. It's where your mind is at, where your awareness is at, that really is where your focus is at. And the ego always wants us to get caught up into the form, questioning the forms, judging the forms, anything to keep the mind from coming to that recognition of perfect stillness. So, one of the primary ego objections to spiritual community and to society, to family, to partnerships, to everything, is what Jesus calls the authority problem. This is where there's an issue with leaders and followers. And we have to realize that once we get into the realm of linear time and leaders and followers, that is where the duality and multiplicity is. It's not going to be found. The state of mind is not going to be found in the duality. But yet, that's what makes the Course so fascinating, is because Jesus is telling us that to teach is to learn, that giving and receiving are the same, that if you want to really experience the joy of teaching, then you have to really see that you are the learner. So you're teaching and learning all the time, and that teaching and learning are not separate. Just like humans are thinking that there's subject and an object, like there are other people, there's an objective world outside of that subject. But even the subject and the object, the observer, the observed, the leader, the follower, they're all the same in a state of mind where there's unified awareness, or in the forgiven world. So we were talking this morning about what have we discovered through all these years of community? What has been the insight or the discovery? Because oftentimes we'll be praying together and there'll be a project or a situation or something where the Spirit will say, so-and-so will lead the project. But it's different than in a corporation where somebody leads the project, because the leader in a spiritual community has to be a follower. Otherwise there'll be a huge contradiction. If you try to lead without being able to follow the Spirit within, it will blow up in your face every time. And that's what we've discovered in all these years of spiritual community. That's also saying that to teach is to demonstrate. You have to be an example of what you're teaching. Because if you're not an example, we know how it is with children. If mom and dad say, stop chewing bubble gum, and the child says, but why do you chew bubble gum if you're telling me not to have bubble gum? Or teenagers, are often told, don't smoke. You can't smoke. But why are you the one telling me to not smoke? Smoking. Because for children and adolescents, this is a striking, glaring contradiction. You have to be an example of what you're teaching, otherwise it contradicts itself, and it's a contradictory teaching. I always tell the story of there was a woman who brought her daughter to Gandhi, Mahatma Gandhi, Mohandas K. Gandhi, and the mother said, please will you see her? My daughter has a terrible problem, and I've tried to talk to her about it, but she just won't listen to me. But Gandhi, she will listen to you. So please talk to her. And then finally, Gandhi said, well, what is it? What is it that you want? What's the problem? And the mother said, my daughter eats too much sugar. So Gandhi said, okay, go away for a week and bring her back in a week. So the mother brings her back, Gandhi talks to the daughter, and then the mother's like, what's the deal? Why did we have to wait a whole week for you to talk to my daughter about eating too much sugar? And Gandhi just smiled with a twinkle in his eye and he said, I eat too much sugar. So he gave himself a week to correct his sugar consumption before he would even speak to the daughter. Now that's integrity. That's integrity, when you won't even attempt to tell somebody something unless you have it in a practical experience. Imagine how, if everyone followed that integrity, how the world would be purified, because everybody would be facing their own thoughts and emotions and beliefs without trying to correct others. And Jesus taught that 2,000 years ago. He said, before you get the speck out of your brother's eye, get the beam or the log out of your own. He was teaching perception. He was teaching a shift in perception 2,000 years ago, before the word perception was invented, using a simple little saying to convey this deep teaching. And that's what we discover is that when we get into the flow of the Spirit, and when we're praying, and then everything is just unfolding in front of us from that prayer, it's like a dance. We're just beholding the dance. And you might say Jesus is the Lord of the dance, because there's the light, and it's just offering a blessing over the whole dance. I remember one time, I think it was in sometime, maybe 2000 and something, maybe 14 or something like that. We were holding a week-long retreat at our Course in Miracles monastery, Living Miracles Monastery in Utah. And it was such a happy week. There was so much joy. It was like bursting joy. People were laughing, singing, dancing. We had these profound sessions, and we just kind of frolicked and danced our way through the whole week. And then we came into the main house, to the main kitchen afterwards, just after the final closing session. So a few of us kind of gathered around the kitchen table, and we were all sitting there. We were still talking and laughing and everything. And then there was a knock at the door. We all were, what? And the door opened, and in comes Jesus. It looked like Jesus. It was like bright, glowing eyes and the long hair, and the door opens, and it just really, I was like, because it looked like Jesus just walked in right after our happy retreat, and what, it was actually our friend Cody, who, when he first came from Florida, he had long hair, and he was all happy, and he said, what a wonderful retreat this was. I have to thank you all, because there's no person in charge here, and I love the feeling. He had a feeling of a week with a bunch of people where there was nobody in charge. That's a fun experience, where you can go and feel so merged, and you don't feel there is a person leading. It's like the Spirit was so strong. And then he closed the door and was gone. It was like a little Jesus comment, with the long hair, curly hair. We were all, but that is the purpose. That's where you find the divine equality. That's where you find the joy. That's where you feel the trust, is when you really feel that you're all merged together and there's no body in charge. And how different that is from our past, when we've grown up with our families, with our organizations, with our churches, with our governments, with the communities even form, and then it's almost like a given who's in charge. Because we've all grown up with a world that is a projection of this ego belief. This ego belief in leaders and followers, in superior and inferior, in those that are ahead and those that are behind, and those that have and those that do not have. It's a distorted world that we're looking at when we look through that lens. And then the ego would have us adapt and adjust to whatever, sometimes strive to be a leader. We know there's this man named Father Thomas Keating, and he was, as a young age, he used to be like an altar boy in the Catholic Church, and he aspired to then become a monk, which horrified his businessman father and his mother and his family. And then he went on to become a priest, and then he went on for years and years to be the head of a monastery. He was the abbot. And then after decades and decades of being the abbot, one day the Spirit made it clear to him that he had to let go of that too. He had to let go of being the abbot, being the spiritual leader. So his monastery said, your services are no longer required. You can only imagine being an abbot for that many decades. Your services are no longer required. And then a couple out in Colorado said, come and live with us. And he said, okay. And oh wow, those last years of his life were the happiest, because he wasn't in charge anymore of keeping the monks in line and all the human condition that takes to manage people. Oh, I can only imagine for like 4 or 5 decades managing people. We know how hard that is. It's an impossible task, and we can see it. The governments can't do it. The families can't do it. It's not possible in society, and ultimately you start to realize you have to outgrow that in spiritual community too, because it's not your supreme happiness to be managing anybody. Rituals have to be outgrown. Repetitions, even Jesus says, practice these lessons with earnest, but he's encouraging us, even in the lessons, to go beyond the repetitions, to go beyond the practice, sink down deep in your mind and come to the light. He's cheering us on to just start with the practice and then go beyond the practice into a state of mind. So that's what we're really learning. That's why this mystery school is called Tabula Rasa Mystery School, because Tabula Rasa is to have your mind be a blank slate. Tabula Rasa reminds me of Workbook Lesson 189, where he starts off, simply do this, be still, lay aside all thoughts you've ever had. And the whole paragraph is sounding very much like just empty your mind of everything you think is good or bad or right and wrong, and come down to the kingdom of heaven. Come to the truth of a state of mind that God created. So that's like the highest goal, and that's why even in our community we will have even guidelines of no people pleasing and no private thoughts, because that helps us come into that state of stillness. It helps us come into a state of non-judgment. It's a daily practice of nothing real can be threatened and nothing unreal exists. It's like that's all we're doing it for, is to realize the actual state of mind. Yeah. And we're happy that you're here with us. You're joining us in this, and we're very happy. This is our way to experience this with our brothers and sisters.
Yeah, and I think even just what's going on in the last couple of days, you see that, our team, they're here in full service, but really nobody is here to think, I'm to serve people, I'm to sacrifice here, I need to work. Because if we're doing what it's most important to us, you never think is a sacrifice or work, which is to learn how to listen and follow the Spirit, to learn how to forgive. And that's why, even the practical guidance we're given of how to do logistics, how to use the daily logistic tasks to serve this purpose, to learn, listen, and follow. People are given little areas so that their mind don't have to think, oh, what about this, what about this, what about this, what is the guidance here? But they can give a little area and say, okay, I trust that this is the area Spirit would guide me because nobody else is focusing on this area. So now let me practice within this very manageable and small area, but use it for listen and follow, and use it for communication with anybody around it. So to open up the channel of communication, to not holding back private thoughts. So it's in this everyday living that we started to experience this openness and this letting go and the trust with our brothers, and then listen and follow. So I think this is the gift that, this is how we live, and the team are just doing what they're doing every day. But the lesson is always very personal. The lesson is always very intimate. But I think after this week, then we would all get into this way of living, get hands-on.
And as you come here to the mystery school, you come as you are. It's like that song that Jackie Velasquez sings, "Come as you are, don't change a thing. Open your heart and let my love in." And that's when we come to the mystery school, we come as we are, or even as we seem to be, with whatever preferences we have, with whatever we're looking for, with whatever we feel we have to avoid, with whatever our consciousness seems to be in the moment. That is like, for Jesus, that's just grist for the mill. He's like, great, that's just what I wanted you to just present yourself just as you believe you are. You're still welcome. You don't have to reach some kind of a point of achievement before you're welcome. No, you're welcome. Come as you are. And then, as we come, and even to be together and share the same space, and so on and so forth, then all the seeming practicalities, the logistics of food, of bathing, of sleeping, of internet connection, of all the things, keeping the place clean. That's what I was told when I was young. They told me, always, when you go to a space, David, always leave it as good or better than you found it. That was an interesting thing to hear early on, because then it was almost like you have attentiveness. You weren't trying to, if I would mess things up, I would think, oh yeah, I have to leave it as good or better. So I would organize it and clean it and then leave it that way. That's like a mindset. But I think underneath that guideline was more of giving and receiving are the same. Whatever you do, you offer yourself a blessing, instead of this mindset of what's mine and what's theirs. Because that mindset just seems to have all kinds of problems with it. But that's why we have expression sessions, and even these sessions, like this session today, or if there's another session tonight, that's where you really get where the rubber meets the road, where the practical application of the ideas comes in, and that's where it's good to have the curiosity about something that you perceive. And you may like it or you may dislike it, but the most important thing is, how can this situation or this encounter or this circumstance be used for my forgiveness? You see how it makes it so practical. It doesn't avoid it or deny it, and it doesn't pretend that something's not happening in front of you. It's more, use what you believe is happening in front of you to find out how to forgive, how to let it go, how to be peaceful in that whatever circumstance. And that's why I liked that when Jesus took me on a road trip for 5 years, I didn't know at the time it would be 5 years, but I'm grateful for it now, because traveling and going into so many people's homes and meeting so many people, having been like a hermit or a loner, that is a really good way to get in touch with your consciousness. If you believe you're a loner and you go on a 5-year road trip, then that really washes away the loner concept with another experience, which is just a connectedness. Like, wow, I like this idea of this connection. And also it's so practical, because then you don't feel like you're wasting time. You feel like that time is being used in a productive way to bring you to peace of mind. That's how I felt. I didn't feel like I was burdened by traveling. At the beginning I was scared, because I didn't know how it was going to work. How does this go? I wasn't drawn to this, so how is this going to benefit me? And Jesus would reassure me, this will benefit you in more ways than you can imagine, but you can't tell that. So it was like, just trust me, just stay with me, keep trusting me, and then an experience will come that will end your doubting. Have faith in that. Have faith that I'm taking you toward an experience that will be free of fear and doubt. So that's really what we're doing, and that's why we like there to be open discussions among all of us while we're here, because, as Francis was saying, we have the faith that the Spirit can use anything, any symbol, any word. Even a word for someone may be talking to you and they say a word and it triggers something. Okay, don't stop there with "you offend me." That is not where you would stop, because then you'll just think you're offended. But if you say and you notice a feeling offended or feeling stirred up or upset or activated or something from the word that somebody used. That was great when Kenneth came, was it 2017?
Yeah,
to the May Mystery School then, yeah. And I think, instead of me doing it, Lisa was doing the opening session over there in our little gathering room, and she just started to use a trigger word for you at the time.
I had a lot of trigger words.
There was a lot. You were majorly triggered. Lisa was kind of just in there, and it was involuntary, so she was shooting out like trigger words every 2 or 3 sentences without, and Kenneth is getting into a tangled ball of knots by the end of the hour-and-a-half talk or whatever. That's quite an introduction there to a mystery school, but then we always have the choice. We can stay offended, or we can start talking about it. And maybe when we first start talking about it, we sound very offended. Of course we sound offended, because that's how we feel. And we're just expressing with words and emotions in our face how we're feeling. And the Spirit's like saying, good, this is all good. This is all good. We're through just denying and repressing and stuffing things down or biting our tongue and biting our lip. We're through with that. we're going into a transparency and authenticity of healing, and it will not feel so good because the ego will feel offended at the spiritual journey. The spirit's not offended by the spiritual journey. It's the ego that's offended, but it's the ego that we want to release. So in one sense you can see that you give yourself more permission then to just, okay, I feel what I feel, and this is what I feel now, and I'm going to say it. And I'm going to trust too that the Spirit is with me, and the Spirit is with all of my brothers and sisters, and the Spirit's going to lift me and carry me through this whole healing process. And yeah, that's the way it goes. It's truly the way it goes. And Kenneth's still here. 4 years later. How sweet. Yeah. Well, Eric has a microphone. If anybody would like to share anything or ask anything.
So I'm curious to hear your reflections or insights, because this morning in the meditation, I had this experience of hearing Spirit say to me, like, Danielle, just relax. You can relax, you can relax. But I was feeling so much resistance to relaxing. And yeah, and I was just like sitting at that threshold and hearing like all of these thoughts, like, no, Danielle, you can't relax. Like, your fear actually serves you. Your anxiety is good for you. Like it, one of the things that came to me was, I wrote it down because it like really stood out to me. I said, I'm afraid of present peace of mind because it is irresponsible. Like, if I'm totally peaceful, I'm not caring for myself. Or like, my fear actually motivates me. And peace is a threat to my livelihood. You know, like those kind of beliefs. And I'm just like, I still feel myself sitting at that threshold. Like, even during this talk, hearing the two of you, I could feel myself softening and relaxing, and then just watching the ego that's like, no, you can't. That's like not safe. To relax, to trust, to be peaceful. And just seeing that I don't believe, like you mentioned yesterday, everything will be provided without effort. I so don't believe that. I just believe I need like enormous effort. And if I like let my mind be peaceful, then I won't be taken care of. So I'm just like watching how much it feels like a threat. And the thought of not planning or not analyzing, that's just fucking terrifying. So I'm just feeling guided to share this, and I have the call in my heart to feel that peace and that joining with God, but just the resistance is strong.
Thank you, Danielle. Yeah, you are describing the baseline for the whole human condition, because there's so much of this sense of worth that's tied into the body, that's tied into the activities of the body, that's tied into what the body produces. You know, when you even say the word work, a lot of times people will have memories and associations of the body doing things for money or for some type of exchange or something for survival. So biological life as a human being is tied into this work. You have to work to live. That's the bottom line of that belief. And there was a little book that by Khalil Gibran called The Prophet, and one of the topics that Almitras the seer asked him to speak about before he set sail and left on the ocean was, speak to us of work. That was one of the topics. And he said, when you work with love. So it must be that there is a way that we can be inspired by the Holy Spirit to work with love. Instead of being so identified with the doer, or the one that has to produce the actions and behaviors that bring something of value to the world, and we're paid or we're given something in exchange for it, it must be that there must be a way that we can give the puppet of the body over to the Holy Spirit and Jesus and say, use it, please use it. And Ricky was sharing in our circle that's what she had felt, was she started to feel unused, like not used to capacity, and there was like a deadness or a frustration or an anxiety that tied into that not being used. And so for me, I know that was a progressive awakening that seemed to occur where I had to keep saying, take my skills, take my body, take my bank account, take resources, take everything about this David character and the David surroundings of David, I give it all to you. Be you in charge. It's so different than our programming. It's all look out for number one, and nobody's going to look out for you but yourself. And it's very much of a survival of the body mentality. That's an entire belief system, deep programming. We're not talking about shallow, but deep down to the roots of this survival. So I remember in the parable of David where I got A Course in Miracles in 1986, and at that time I had student loans to repay, and I still was opening to be shown a way to train my mind, but in a practical way. Did I have needs? Yes, I had needs for food, for clothing, for transportation, for paying back a student loan. It was, Jesus is always so practical. He doesn't ever tell us to be like the ostrich and just bury our head in the sand and pretend the world's not there. He will take us right where we believe we are in consciousness. And I remember even those years after having the Course, I remember I did all this praying on what should I do, and Jesus was like, "Oh, I'll guide you to jobs that will help to pay down the debt, but will also," he said, "these are all forgiveness opportunities. It's just going to be unwinding your mind from the ego. That's really what I'm working with you for that whole thing, but it will seem as if you will seem to get loosened up from some of these needs and debts and so on and so forth." So, but there were times when I was reading the Course or meditating and I would have that same voice, like, wasting your time, sitting here doing nothing. You are not a productive member of society. Your family is not proud of your meditations and reading this crazy blue book. The ego would just rattle on me, just really viciously, like, total waste of time is the way the ego was always putting it to me. And there was anxiety with that too, because it was like, even though the Bible says you cannot serve two masters, I had one soft master in my mind saying, oh, thank you for studying the course, thank you for practicing the lessons, thank you for praying, thank you for meditating. And then the other voice was just railing, total waste of time. Where is this going to get you? This is going nowhere fast, and you will really suffer in the future based on this wasted time. So I can certainly relate to what you're talking about, and that actually was my time for faith. And so the more I prayed, meditated, did my course lessons, and just started to follow my intuition, I started to get rapidly happier. I mean, rapidly, noticeably happier. And the Holy Spirit would say, see? And I would be like, wow, this is not a direction that I would have ever conceived of in my life, but it feels wonderful. And I do feel I have more energy, and I feel much more peaceful and alive than I've ever felt. And then the ego again would try to come back with this railing voice, but it started to get a little weaker, because the evidence was in the experience. And that is how the Spirit reaches us, through our actual experiences. So it's just a call for faith. It's just a call to keep at it. You came here. That was a huge step, probably with much ego resistance just in the coming. And then now that you're here, as you sit on a bench or sit in a chair or the prayer room, then the ego is not happy that you made it this far even, and it wants you to shut down this whole crazy movement. And actually, really you don't want that. Deep down you want to keep going with the faith. Yeah. So thank you. That's, I'm sure, very common. You've shared something that's very, very common that everybody can relate to.
Hey. I don't even know how to put this in words, but I will try. I think I would like to understand more about this leadership. It's one of my triggers word. Like I don't know, because right now, like my mind is a mess. Like many topics mix it, like content, form, authority problem, and unworthiness. That I don't know. I feel that Spirit is trying to show me something, but it's not clear what it is. So I would like to hear more about it, because like it really looks like, for example, here in the communities there are like leaders, for like tech leaders, you are the main leader, but I know it's not like only the form, so the content is like equality, but right now it's really a mess for me, and I know it's one point of struggle. And it's the point that I can feel like the two teachers like in my mind. So, oh, look, focus on the content. No, but it looks like you need to be the leader. I don't know if I'm clear, but I'd love to hear more from you about this topic, because I really want to understand this and forgive everything that is still like triggers me about this.
Yeah. Well, when Jesus talks in the Course about leaders and followers, he said there's times that you want the leader position and you want to have followers, and there's times when you want the follower position and you want to give away the leadership position. And this is most often seen in relationships, which the psychologists of the world would call them codependent relationship, where there's a constant trying to put somebody in a role. And these roles could be called inferior and superior. They could be called follower and leader. The ego doesn't want the mind to remember its perfect oneness in God. And the closest approximation of the oneness of God's love is equality in this world. And that's why the ego is always wanting to hand out roles that would block this perfect equality. So it will hand out the leader roles and the follower roles. And then it has a game of switching. It doesn't mind if you switch, but that you maintain the roles. There's a famous saying that I remember it hit me so hard at the beginning of my work with the Course, where it was kind of like, don't follow me because I may not want to lead, and don't lead me because I may not want to follow. Walk beside me and hold my hand as we walk the self-same road. And when I first heard that, I was like, oh my God, that's it. Walk beside me and hold my hand as we walk the self-same road. So, because the ego investment is so strong in the leader role and the follower role, that it comes back to guidance where you have to pray and you have to say, okay, Jesus, you know the way. You know the way that I can let go of both of those false roles, because they're not true. But I need to follow a guide that will use what the ego made to undo what the ego made. I need to follow a guide that can use time to undo time, that can use these crazy leader-follower concepts in an integrous way, so that I will be left smiling and happy and laughing like at the impossibility of it. But these roles are deeply, deeply ingrained. And I know that was one of the gifts that I had when I traveled around, because when you're in school or you're in a partnership or you're in a business, these roles can be quite set. You know, you even get hired based upon the role. Oh, you're a manager. And then, wow, then you've got to play the manager role and you've got to handle all the requests and things of all the people in the business. If you're hired as an employee, you're usually put in a position to follow what the boss or your immediate boss will say. What your immediate boss tells you to do, you have to do. And there's resistance to that. There is a sense of frustration, a sense of, there's like a major control issue that comes up just in accepting a job position where you say, the boss is asking me to do things that I don't feel, and yet I'm getting paid money to do things that I don't feel. You see what the contradiction that is. That's the world. It's just filled with egoic contradictions. So, for me, it was important, like, if Jesus started his, we'll call it public mission of 3 years, by getting baptized by John the Baptist in the River Jordan, and then after John baptizes Jesus, then this dove comes down and lands on Jesus' head, and this big voice says, "This is my beloved Son, in whom I'm well pleased." And then after that point, it even gets more interesting, because he starts walking around saying to Simon Peter and to Matthew and everything, "Follow me." Well, you know, nowadays you could just imagine in this thing, you know, having some guy walking around going, "Follow me." It's like, Yeah, I don't think so. What's your credentials? Who are you? What's your resume? Why should I follow you? And it would be even worse if he said, leave all behind and follow me. Let's get the straitjackets for this guy, let's lock him up, because it seems so out of pattern. But there had to be a sense of a presence when Jesus looked into their eyes, something bigger than time and space. For a group of fishermen to leave their fishing boats, and in some cases their families, Peter was married, to leave your occupation and your family, or whatever your situation is, and then you can only imagine calling Matthew, a tax collector. That's like not a good mix, and with a group of Jewish fishermen to throw a tax collector who's collecting money for the Romans in the middle. There's a lot of emotions that got triggered with that. But Jesus was leading by example, to teach us, to demonstrate. It wasn't in his words, but it was something in his state of mind or presence that was felt, that there was some kind of a deep connection and some kind of a recognition and some kind of sense of equality. Like I think he did have a sense of humor and joked, and people around him felt like they were one of him. They were. That's why they could even call themselves friends. Did they doubt in the following? Yes, there probably wasn't a day that went by that they were going, what the hell am I doing? I left my family, my fishing boat, and things are not looking good, because the Sanhedrin and the Pharisees and even the Romans started to get a little stirred up. I mean, the further it went in those 3 years, they were probably doubting their following, even more so. And then when Jesus got arrested, they just locked themselves in the room. They were like, the fear level went through the roof, because they're thinking like, oh, now I could lose my life by following this guy. They're going to get him and they're going to get the rest of us. So the fear level went up. But I guess maybe, Francis, you can share, as we have gone on this journey together with our brothers and sisters, the question you're asking, Paulina, has come up. It comes up a lot. And I do remember the time I was down in Sydney, and you had invited me to come to your house. And so I went to the house, and Francis said, yeah, make yourself at home. So I sat in one of the chairs, comfortable chairs, and was just making myself at home. And then Francis said, Jason, come with me. I have to go out and get some groceries. And so I said, oh, okay. Well, they said, we'll be back. So off Francis goes with Jason. They go to the grocery store, and then from the story I heard, Francis kind of directly corners Jason at the grocery store with kind of like, all right, give it to me straight. What's it going to take? Right away in the grocery store, like, you guys are in my house, but I've got you here. What's it going to take? And she really, really was looking right into Jason's eyes and in the grocery store aisle, and just, and he was like, trust. Trust what? You can imagine. And he said confidently to her, trust David and trust me. He said in the grocery store. And that's where it started, like right there in the grocery store.
And I felt, well, that's something I can do. If that is what it takes. Thanks for a very simple and direct instruction that I actually can relate to and do. If he said trust God, I would be, okay. It doesn't mean anything to me. But, that's exactly it. I mean, over the years, I see that with the leader, because that's what you're asking at the level of form. It looks like there are many leadership roles, many follower roles, and actually it has a lot of meanings. the ego has put a lot of meanings to what it means to be a leader, what it means to be a follower. So with those meanings that have been given to it, there is judgment and charge. Oh, who got to be the leader? You're someone, What does it take for me to be a leader? You have to get there. But one thing is really missing in the ego's interpretation is actually guidance. That's where trust lands on. Eventually, when we all do this dance together, we trust this one guidance that is provided so that everything works together for good. So the guidance would provide very specifically according to the readiness, the willingness, and the prayer of the heart. And so the leadership role sometimes were given, a lot of the times in our community, given to people who have absolutely no experience whatsoever. And then the ones who follow, who have accumulated years of mind training experience, would react because association is, I have earned something and I know something and my knowledge means something. So, but truly the deeper desire underneath even that is, I want to be happy and I want to know what forgiveness is. And Spirit truly answers the very deep prayer of every single one at the right time. So people are called to leadership according to a very deep prayer, and it serves the bigger picture. People are called to follow for the same reason, but not individual can really judge and understand with the very limited frame and the immediate benefit, because the benefit is not in this immediacy of what the individual can gain. It's actually in the mind. It's all for undoing. And that's really where everything starts to click, because the shared prayer is, please guide us in, what the configuration is and who is to be in what role. And that becomes just very easy. It's not personal. And it also doesn't really give much meaning to the leader and follower as to the worldly sense. But the meaning is, this is used for forgiveness for the leader, same for the follower. But also, ultimately, we're all here to follow Jesus. And certain people are, they have this devotion to listening, and they have this devotion to full communication, and Jesus wants to use that to call on other people to tap into this and to receive the fruit of the devotion and the fruit of communication. So that's what also another thing that I have seen is devotion attracts devotion. And the ones who are devoted to are being followed voluntarily because of their devotion, because their openness to Jesus. People don't feel attracted to a person just because your experience, just because your skills, but it's very, very, the sincerity of the heart and the devotion actually started to call us to join each other, to learn from each other. So that's how I see it. And that's where trust comes in with guidance. When we join in our guidance, like David is saying, the disciples would had a hard time understanding Jesus' way of leading because it was so different. And this is the same today. When the guidance comes in, we could all say, why is this, why is that? Or we can say, let's just trust our prayer of the heart, trust what we hear, and we move forward with trust.
Yeah, Jesus actually takes quite a bit of time in his course to carefully define his role as a teacher, and that is I think one of the most fascinating parts of the course, is because he's saying to teach is to demonstrate, and he's carefully trying to show, don't overrate or overestimate me as a teacher, and don't underrate or underestimate me. In fact, the way he describes it with such care, he's going right at your question, because he's saying, I'm not to be glorified or put down. I am deserving of love because I am a brother. I am deserving of respect because I'm like an elder brother. I am in full demonstration of a wisdom that is eternal, and therefore I am entitled to respect because, like an elder brother, if you had an elder brother or sister in your family that was very wise, that had gone through a lot of healing experiences and was willing to say, "Oh, come here, sis, come here," and take you under their arm and say, "Here, let me tell you about dating," yeah, and you're like, "Yes, please, please tell me more." My heart is like, so let me tell you about dating, or whatever the topic is. You enjoy listening to that wisdom because you know it's coming from an actual experience. They're not pontificating to you. They're actually telling you from their actual experience, and it's very helpful. And then there's a line in the Course where Jesus says that a brother is entitled to devotion if he is devoted. This is one of the things that people who do the Course, it's all about, we're all the same, we're all one, we're all equal, and then they look back at like ancient India, of all the countries, that country has got so many masters and gurus and saints and mystics, in their history, probably more than all the other countries combined. And one of the typical things is to say, that system's off, because that's not what the Course is teaching. But if you go much, much, much deeper, why did, after many, many decades, did people start to gather around Ramana Maharshi, who wasn't even speaking that much? Why would they come from all over the world to be in his presence when he wasn't even speaking that much? There was a movie. What was that movie we have in our collection that was based on Razor's Edge? There was a original Razor's Edge, I think back in 1948 with Tyrone Powell, and then there was Bill Murray's version, another Razor's Edge. That movie was based on meeting Ramana Maharshi. A lot of people don't know that, but those are two modern-day Hollywood movies that were based on that. And yet, they came into the presence of that because they felt the non-judgment, they felt the love, they felt the connection there, and they were drawn to it. They were curious. That's why they came from all over the world. And in that sense, that's kind of like Jesus saying that a brother is entitled to devotion if they are devoted. And clearly that was like an example with Ramana. Now I've been over to visit Muji and his center in Sahaja. We had some beautiful times together, and Lisa was with us, and Svava. Did they have leaders and followers in the Muji community? Yes. Is it subject to the same ego debates and doubts? Yes. If you went to visit Adyashanti, if you went to visit anyone who's had a life of years, even decades of devotion, you would see the same functional rings, but as with Muji, it's very much into prayer and guidance. I remember Muji said, "Oh, come with me, David, I've got a Jesus chapel," and he did his hand paintings in his cute little Jesus chapel, and he took us and showed us around. There was one workstation that actually had burned, And we got to see that it burned. But here we have a community living in southern Portugal and some migration going on to Rishikesh, depending on the seasons down in India. But you find the same thing, that it's the same leader-follower roles that you would find in a government, in a corporation, in a family, except it's based on guidance and forgiveness. It's meant to undo the ego. That is what the purpose. It's like that's a prime example of how the Holy Spirit can use what the ego made. Admittedly, the ego made up the leader-follower. There's no leaders and followers in heaven, not in nirvana for sure. But the ego did make them, and the ego made up time and space. It made up money, currency. It made up sexuality. It made up all kinds of things that are part of its dualistic, multiplistic world. But the guidance, how the Spirit uses that to unwind, is extremely important. And like, with frequency d'amore, you were guided very strongly to start that out of prayer. And anytime you start something like that, if you have an organization or a nonprofit or whatever, there's going to be board members, there's going to be logistics of handling finances, of handling different projects, groups. That's what happens in time and space. There's going to be the same things that appear all the way through the fabric of time and space. But if it's guided by prayer, it will be peaceful and harmonious in awareness. But once the ego jumps in there and starts to judge and criticize, it will make havoc of the mind. You can feel how the mind gets all stirred up. And it can be in your own mind, or it can be from your brothers and sisters that start just poking and pointing their finger in your face. Oh, it's the same, right? If you're just thinking about it, or you actually see it acted out, it's the same thing, because my thoughts are images I have made. There's really no external world to this consciousness. The consciousness is the problem. Jesus calls consciousness the domain of the ego. And he says, but consciousness can be trained. So, great. But we want to train it so much that consciousness disappears into God. And then God is real. Love is real. So it's beautiful because Jesus gives us a beautiful system, and all of us have had the thoughts about why. Why do I have to do this? I think one of the early times when Frances came to the monastery, and here she is, she's owned company, she's had houses, husband, she's had success in the whole world. She comes all the way across the ocean, Pacific Ocean, she's at the monastery, and I think one particular day she was carrying rocks. And she's like thinking, I am a small Chinese woman. And I can think of a lot of ways the Holy Spirit can use this body with my 10, 11 years of education, my skills and articulation and abilities and everything. But carrying rocks is not one of them. So I think then you say to Lisa, because Lisa saw that she was not happy and carrying the rocks.
Lisa was, I was, just carrying, and Lisa ran into me and just said, how are you doing? Like as a passing comment. And I just said, I'm working. Meaning like, I don't even want to talk about it. Just, I'm working. Can't you tell? And then she passed me by, and then she turned around and stood in front of me. She said, what's your work? And I was like, oh, yeah, I totally forgot what my work was. To watch my mind. So that was a beautiful wake-up call.
Yeah. And that's exactly how it goes, because it's like we're always here to monitor our mind and monitor our thoughts, and then to give it over when we start to feel burdened, upset, heavy in any way, because we're entitled to joy. God's will is for us to be happy and joyful. So when we start to feel that heaviness, then Jesus does say, he says in the Course, you may believe that you are responsible for what you do, but not for what you think. The truth is, you are responsible for what you think. None of us were raised with that. Eat your food, no dessert if you don't clean your plate. You better be on your good behavior, because if you do get bad grades, then you're grounded, you're not going to get allowance. It was all consequences. You have to live a certain way, under my house, you live by my rules, and then if you mess up, you pay the price. Well, that's what we're coming from. We're coming from this whole programming that there's consequences, there's punishment, there's going to be a payment for mistakes and errors. And Jesus is taking us toward the holy instant, and toward a state of mind that's so pristine that there is no thought of punishment or consequences in that state of mind of heaven or nirvana. It's just love. But we need to be rinsed of a lot of things to reach that. And these are the things that you're going through emotionally. These are the things that, of course, I went through, and if you went through most any spiritual teacher, they would tell you their stories. Even Yogananda, Paramahansa Yogananda, you took a trip here from Brazil to Mexico, and then all hell broke loose behind you. Yogananda, he was just out traveling around the United States, and his best friend took most of the self-realization fellowship congregation with him while he was out just sharing the good news. He came back home and, where is everybody? His best friend took off with them, and then he had to face such heartbreak, such feelings of betrayal and abandonment, that he came right here to Chapala, Mexico. Of all the places, he came here to pray, just to pray and pray and pray, to face whatever was going on in his own mind, his own consciousness, because it was like he had so much doubt. Like, where did I go wrong? Kind of like the Brother, Sun, Sister, Moon movie, when the bishop's soldiers come to burn St. Francis's church, and then he's just shaking his head. Why? What did I do wrong? It just was a huge moment of doubt, because he couldn't imagine, that who could come and kill one of his devoted, simple followers? Who could harm such a creature? Was one of his first thoughts. Who could harm such a creature? And then to burn the church, that just seemed like, why would the church send soldiers? Even funny that the church has soldiers, but why would the church, you could see a few contradictions in there. Why would you send the church soldiers? That doesn't sound right. Why would you send the church soldiers to burn a church when you weren't allowed to go in there? If you're here to share the good news, and you had previously said St. Francis is restoring a consecrated ruin for love. That's what the bishop said, and then he's sending soldiers. But that just shows you how wacky the ego is. It just doesn't know what it wants. It bounces around. So these are definitely the times for faith, because this is the time to say, no, I think the steps I took, I really felt them, and that everything that unfolded was meant to unfold, and then everything that's currently unfolding is also meant to unfold, because it's all part of a prearranged plan, and only thing we have is how we look at it. We don't get to tell God, stop this, rearrange this, do this different. We just have to see it differently, see it with calm eyes. Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah, just what I shared yesterday, I was in a very dark place, and listening to you this morning. Yesterday I began to open up to people here. It was just the first days. Yesterday I felt really just deep pain. And that felt good, to open up. When I went to bed last night, just what came to me is, I don't want to squander this opportunity. I just don't want to waste. It's like a whole life of, I've been in Mexico a couple of months. It's the same thing over and over again, wandering around the world. And stayed with somebody for a couple of months. And again, just thrown deep into ego, doings, blah, blah, blah. I went out to have a fag this morning. Again, I woke, when I wake in the mornings, it's like, the only way I can describe it is like there's a vice on my head with the screws turning, and I am so tired of living like that. I was having a fag, and just what rose up in me is, again, that I don't want to squander this time. I don't want to be walking on eggshells around people here, holding people out, holding them back. I want to see the smiles. I want to feel the joy. I want to feel the peace. I spent something which was deeply painful for me. Is that I spent 15 years in Christianity, late 30s, and the experiences I had with Jesus, the deep heart connection, and the joy and the peace, and I could say bliss. I can't even describe it. And that was a very constant experience for me all the way through. I remember times going to church, and I would just, worship. I would raise my hands. And my God, the light that would hit me and come in and just flow. It was just made such a beautiful expression or symbol of my open heart. And Jesus just rushing in. And, I've talked to you about experience I had with actually the other evening, Francis, when you were speaking, you mentioned, there was talk of mighty companions, and this huge rage and anger. It was a huge no. When you're talking about the beauty, the joy of people sharing the mighty companions, this huge rage rose up in me. It was like a massive N-O, no. And that was related to an experience I've shared with you, David. I don't want to go into that, but that was a very frightening and deeply painful experience. And really, it's the whole, just the word mighty companion became very, very dark for me. Very dark. And I just didn't know what to do with that. Indescribable pain inside me. Coming from, I don't want to, sometimes people say don't tell stories, but I need to get stories out to get rid of them. Having spent from the age of 2 to 19 in a Catholic orphanage, and the abuse and physical, verbal, sexual, whatever, the lot. People would ask me sometimes, I never talked about it much. It's like something you shared earlier, and people would say, what was it like for you, John? With close friends, it would inevitably. And the only thing I could ever think of saying to people was, well, it's like you go into a confession box. Bless me, Father, for I have sinned, blah, blah, blah. You give your confession, the priest blesses you. Go in peace, my son, God loves you. And an hour later, he's beating the shit out of you. Or some other people around you. And that, for me, when I came out of that, it left me with such a distorted view of life. And what I see, actually, looking back, I see, at this stage of my life, I was just talking to Danielle yesterday, I see the same story over and over and over again. Different place, different people, work, family, and it's psycho, it's mad. It's totally crazy. And, yesterday morning, my heart wasn't open. It was just, and it's gradually opening. And my heart is, when I came across you first, but a couple of years ago, I can't remember how, such beauty and joy. It's like what I had in Christianity. I immediately connected to you and to Francis and to others here, but particularly you two. I just knew it just resonated inside me when I listened to you. And when I had some email contact with you at one point, and we shared things, and having listened to you. And the one thing that fascinated me when you would respond to me, and particularly that time when there was just deep pain, and I saw this online, you never responded to personal. You weren't talking to people. You weren't talking to me, to my pain. I never saw you online. I love the interactions at the end of the meetings. But one thing I saw very clearly is this David, he does not respond to the pain or the person, the personality, if you like. It was always above that, and it always fascinated me. It's like it was truth. I don't know if I'm making sense, but that I could get that, and I could see this is very different. This is like that connection I had with Jesus, where when I rose above it and experienced that, it's just a different world. So I thank you for that. I mean, I can say now, I know that's when I came across you. I've always had the desire to come here. Never knew how that would happen, the fear, but I'm here. I couldn't say it yesterday, but I am very, very grateful to be here. And I don't want to squander the time. I don't want to spend 6 weeks walking around with my brothers and sisters with a push in my heart and the head down and feeling pain. I just want to, yes, there'll be times, the expression sessions, they scare the hell out of me in some ways, but I know deep down is the only way, is to get it up and let it out. I don't want the crap, and I don't have questions anymore, in the sense I've spent years reading the Bible. I've read the course. For the first 2 years, I read it avidly, doing the things, and the joy of that. When the course came to me, the realization, the pinpoint of Jesus pointing out, this is where it's in your mind. And in Christianity, I would have I'm not criticizing by any means, it was a joyful experience, painful, but joyful. Pointing out that it kind of presented me with that deep confusion of having the joy yet falling deeply back into the darkness and pain, and that constant switch, and it answered it for me. It didn't go away, but when just sharing one thing, when I would listen to Jesus tell me the slightest twinge of pain and the pure raw rage is the same thing, I just thought, wow. I don't want that anymore. Anyway, I won't go on, but it's just to express my heart. I don't want to waste my time here. I don't want to squander. I don't know what the hell is ahead of me. It scares the hell out of me. Leaving here, going back into that world, there's nothing there for me, nothing. Just raw pain and confusion, and I don't want to waste time with everyone here, being caught up in pain, but to use it to express that, to be open, to be honest, to, one last thing that I'll share. The passage I read last week, do some sharing on tribe, and that passage where Jesus talks, I love the way he says things. There's the simplicity and But he says it's curious, you know that word. It's curious that a habit so debilitating, talking about judgment, would be so deeply cherished. I mean, when I read that, I think, oh my God, curious. That word curious it's almost like a picture, Papa saying to me, child, my beloved child, how curious that you cherish such a thing that is so deeply, deeply debilitating and whatever, crazy. And that's what I want. It's like, yeah, that's curious and that's crazy. And I want that for me. I want it for all of us. I know that joy. It's, I was sharing with Kenneth earlier on when I had those experiences, many, many of them, for me, the word joy and give, when I was joyful, I would give. When I give, I'm joyful. There's no separation. It's like they're so inextricably bound up together. Joy, giving, peace, love. It's all the same for me. I know that experience in my heart, and it's Jesus, it's God. And I know the joy and the peace of that. Whoever's out there, a prostitute, a businessman in a suit, whatever, it didn't make any difference to me. But I want that. It's all that matters in life, and that's the reason I'm here. And I'm very, very grateful. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, we join you in that. We join you in that prayer. None of us want to waste time. We're here to heal, to know the healing.
Oh, yeah, it just feels like there's a big pull to share and a lot of fear that's coming up. So one of the things that's so beautiful about this community to me is how there's so much space for people to speak. And, I've spoken of my spiritual community that I've been a part of for probably close to 10 years. And one that drew me to that community, I think, is that it's based on the teachings of Ramana Maharshi. And we spent so much time in silence, and that was very comfortable for me. And there's always been this huge fear of speaking in public, and a lot of isolating and like for the last 2 years, there's just been so much time spent alone, and also surrounded by really loving people on the path that were there whenever I needed support in doing my work. And I'm so grateful for that. Like, I don't think I would have ever been able to come here without that. And it's just really an example of how Spirit is guiding everything. And I guess I just would like to expose this also, because this tendency of the mind getting really irritated when there's a lot of speaking. I mean, it comes from, it was in my family. Like, there, if you spoke at the dinner table, you might get cussed at. And then I ended up as a court reporter in criminal court like taking dictation all day long. So it was like constant aggravation that I lived with for years. Just like, you got to get it all down, you got to get it all down. And then there's also this, a lot of judging and unworthiness that comes up around my attention span. You know, I can't concentrate, and I can see now, like, I thought there's something wrong with me because I can't. That actually started in school, you know, just school was difficult because it's just always somebody talking at me. And yeah, but just the joy I'm finding in connecting, you know, despite this belief, oh, you need a lot of alone time. So yeah, I just wanted to express that, how so grateful I am for everyone here, everyone sharing, and just the love and the guidance. You know, I have all these pictures of Ramana Maharshi around my house, and then about the time, I don't know, 6 months or so ago, when I got back into the course, there was this big pull to just buy a huge poster of Jesus. And like, I never have a pull to buy anything, but I have this huge poster of Jesus by my bed, which I love. Yeah, so I'm just really grateful.
Yeah, thank you. That is a beautiful topic too. Just Jesus is asked, what is the role of words in healing? And he says, strictly speaking, words play no part in healing. So it's showing us how deep it goes into prayer and then ultimately into silence for the experience that we're praying for. But in stepping towards that, then the question always is, what is the purpose of the words? Just like, what is the purpose of the silence or the meditation? The purpose belongs out in front to really benefit us, and where we quit judging one form against another, silence in terms of speaking, you know, where we put it on the line of opposites and then judge one versus the other. But so actually, yeah, that's something that over the many years has been a focus of really coming into a discernment of the purposeful use of words, because the ego made the world in hatred, and as long as the ego remains given a place in the mind, a belief, then it will from time to time misuse the words. It will use the words for its own purposes. So I'm glad you brought that topic up, and it's beautiful context that you've given, coming from a community where there was so much silence. And it does take a lot of prayer and guidance to let words be used in a purposeful way. I know I've spoken with a lot of people who've been part of Muji's communities too, where I visited, and they said, yeah, I mean, it was more of falling back on silence. Of course, Muji's in the lineage of Ramana Maharshi as well. And so with this teaching from Jesus, it's giving us a pathway to use words in a purposeful way to reach deep inside and go towards that healing. And I've seen it in many ways come in very strong ways. Francis and I have been to China maybe 7 times. And the first couple times it was really, really evident that so many people felt very much in repression and denial of so many things, that when we broke the room up into small groups for expression sessions, there was over 25 people in each group. We had four facilitators, and it was almost like they were waiting for me to come, because they grabbed 2 chairs, and they put them in front of the circle, and then I was sitting in one chair, and then one by one they hopped out of their their chairs, almost like not to waste any time. And they would jump out, and another one would jump in, and they would cry and scream and emote everything that they had denied and repressed in their mind. And I just would be there in the presence of love for them, but they almost were working together to try to help each other. Like, okay, we can get it out here. Let's get it. And it was quite interesting with 4 groups, over 25 each. And then they attempted to adapt our no private thoughts and no people pleasing on QQ groups, but they turned more into projection sessions because they didn't have the experience of what was really underneath it. But they were still trying as best they could to help find relief, to find a healing relief. So thank you for sharing what you did, because that is a context, and it is something that can be used by Jesus, but it really has to be under the guidance of the Spirit. Otherwise the ego can jump in and, of course, try to sabotage the whole thing and use it for blame and all types of projection, but that's not the intention. Yeah. And we had, I think, back in the corner over here.
Yeah, just when you spoke, I think after Paulina's question, you said something that triggered something for me. You said, tell me about dating. That's about, elder brother, tell me about dating. And that flashes a lot of unworthiness and I guess for also, I guess I've been repressing that desire for intimate relationship for a long time, and really denying and saying that's not what I desire, or that's I want to go beyond, but I feel like it doesn't work. I cannot believe. I cannot. I don't want to. I want to look at it and release the belief. And also the belief that maybe I'm unworthy of that. So, that's been just a big thing coming back, and since maybe 1 year or so, a lot. And I knew that I would be here also going to express that. And when you said this, I felt like, oh, that's for me. That's like such a trigger. So, thank you. Felt good to expose it.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that, because it's on this journey, the ego is quite tricky, so it will just divide behaviors and things in the world into the good, the bad, the helpful, the harmful, and it will make up its own kind of self-concept based on what its journey to God will look like. And as Francis said early on, though, that the Spirit can use any symbol that the ego made to help loosen the mind, unwind the mind from these attachments, these self-concept attachments. And that's what makes it quite an adventure, because when you really come into prayer and you start to really look at what is the purpose for this thing and that thing, and you really start to ask, what is it for? What is the purpose? Jesus says in the Course that there's one question you can safely ask with anything. What is it for? And that's part of a discernment for us to get clearer and clearer on the Holy Spirit's purpose versus the ego's purpose. That's the key healing discernment, when we really can discern. Because, as John was saying, he's curious that you value this something that's so debilitating, as judgment. So clearly, the problem of the sleeping mind is it's, as Jesus says, it's attracted to guilt. He even has 3 subsections in a row: attraction to guilt. Then the next subsection is attraction to pain, and then the next subsection is attraction to death. So he's trying to make a point if he puts 3 subsections titled like that. And many times when people are reading them, they're just shaking their head like, what is he trying to tell me? Then he's got another section called the laws of chaos, where he goes off with his laws of chaos, and then he says, you may believe that you don't believe these laws. He says, but brother, you do. That's what makes the ground under your feet seem solid. So it's like, what? Laws of chaos? But this is why the Course is so helpful and direct. But also it's a path of just faith and willingness to just take one step at a time. Prior to the Mystery School here, starting September 1st, if we roll back the clock, we had a period of transition for maybe a month or a little bit over a month, and then prior to that, we had a program here at La Casa called Co-Living, which came to be named Co-Loving, because Jesus used this as a breeding ground for forming relationships. People would come here from all parts of the world with a determination to do their mind training and not get involved in a relationship. And I don't know, how many couples did we have? 4, at least 4. 4. Yeah, and these were all people that were ranging from, I'm coming on my spiritual journey, I'm not going to be distracted by a relationship, to, I am definitely not coming for a relationship. It was very strong. And all 4 of them had this deep feeling of being drawn together and connected in a very deep way. And it again comes back to that point that miracles are involuntary, Jesus says, and should not be under conscious control. So that's where the faith comes. The Holy Spirit and Jesus know the ego preference patterns, they know what's going on in the sleeping mind, and then will use what the mind believes in to take the mind beyond that belief, beyond those beliefs. And that's why it takes so much trust and faith in the journey, because we can't really decide ahead of time what is spiritual, what's not spiritual, what will take us toward God, what will take us away from God. Many times the ego jumps in and just claims that position, and then denies or discounts a lot of things in the mind that actually are still there. So over the years we've seen, the purposeful use of relationships, we've seen the purposeful use of projects, lots and lots of collaboration where people came with skills, abilities, and then a project would unfold that would bring a blessing to the whole universe. Whether it was a music collaboration or it was a collaboration around fixing up a property. We had one time where I think we had a band. We had a time where we've had choruses. We've had different teams when the community was larger and we were doing travels all over the world, we had a touring team that was focused on making airline arrangements and logistical arrangements and frequent flyer points and using huge communication with hosts. We had a publications team too. Every book that was published, except for one, all the others were self-published. So we would have a publication team, and then oftentimes on the publication team there was nobody who had expertise in publications. Also, we've had people who have learned musical instruments and learned things, that the skills kind of emerged under the Spirit's direction. So learning to play the guitar or different instruments and things that just came in. And and Pete can tell you with all the tech, Pete's like an artist who's been drawn, and same with Eric. They're both artists, but they've been drawn. They're the tech team today. We have two artists, originally artists, that have been drawn into tech. So you can see that it's like handing your skills and abilities over to Spirit and saying, you use them in a way that will unwind the guilt, so I can experience this deep love and connection and this true intimacy that will last forever. And it's quite a journey. I mean, that's part of the fun of hearing everybody's parables and the openness, because we learn through the experience of each other. It's like a time saver. So it's pretty amazing, quite miraculous. I'm glad you brought that up, because that's definitely how it goes.